Chaos Child is about Takuru Miyashiro, a boy striving for relevance in a world that does not acknowledge him. As an aspiring journalist, the president of Hekiho Academy's newspaper club, his desire to find and reveal truths to the world is not done for a wider understanding to be reached. It's elitism, plain and simple. Takuru's depth of knowledge is a separator, dividing him, the right-sider, from the normals and wrong-siders also in the enlightened generation, whom he sees as misguided and foolish. His thoughts echo his pretension, and though he is so certain that he stands in the right, as mystery is uncovered, truth revealed, and story concluded, so much of what he knew turned out to be a lie. The narrative of Chaos Child is one of repercussions, the events of the game stemming from the fallout of the Shibuya earthquake, the centerpiece of Chaos Head's climax. From the Stygian grounds of the destruction, shadowed by an unrelenting mystery, Takuru's assertions as a right-sider are challenged with his new points of view born from the chaos. He witnessed his classmates, ones he saw as ignorant, going out of their way to help an unrelated victim. He's then accosted by his neglectful parents, who'd never shown him much mind before, but now, suddenly, are trying to show him concern. It's a concern full of tired obligation and severe lack of patience, but even then it's so much more than they'd given him before. The overload of new information, and the stresses placed upon him by this whole situation, has him calling out to his imaginary friend, Serika Onoe, and with his delusory powers, stemming from his new status as a gigalomaniac, he's able to give his once imaginary friend corporeal form and existence through a powerful desire. Sarika exists to fulfill her purpose, of which she has two. Her initial purpose, purely as Takuru's imaginary friend, is to fulfill his desire for esteem. Being too impersonable and awkward to achieve recognition himself, Takuru formed a childhood friend in his mind, one less intelligent than him, but always willing to learn, and thus hear him express his domain of knowledge, vindicating his time and effort spent in learning that knowledge in the first place. But she's also made to be even worse off than Takuru, having suffered even more from her non-existent parents than Takuru did from his very real ones. While this suffering doesn't manifest negatively in her personality, as it would detract from the personalized ideal she represents, the quality is still one imposed on a semblance of another person. On some level, Takuru wants Sarika to suffer, outright admitting that by making her weaker, dumber, and less fortunate than him, it gives him someone to protect and educate. It's a dangerous desire, and the more insidious implications of the mindset are shown in the Chaos Child Syndrome patients and the aspects of society their presence evokes. The disassociation provided by the lens news media provides makes the return of new generation madness a cultural phenomenon, grounds for merchandising and memes that trivialize the dark and disturbing murders that Takuru finds himself all too deeply involved in. But Takuru is just an indirect victim, having lost those close to him and come to personal stress and harm through his involvement. Those directly losing their lives are marginalized victims, not just of the murder, but of Chaos Child Syndrome, the post-traumatic stress manifesting itself in not only rapid aging, but pure delusion from the victims, who are unable to see or register their symptoms through shared psychic delusion. They don't recognize themselves as Chaos Child Syndrome victims, so even as they are marginalized through the murders, they don't become aware of it due to their inability to process information contradicting their constructed reality. The patients enjoy the thrilling murders as they don't connect the horrors to their personal lives, allowing the persecution to continue blindly. The contradiction in taking enjoyment from the suffering of others is something Takuru's only able to realize when he's able to relate to the victims through being so close to them. The downward thinking mindset that gives solace to those unfortunate by giving them someone lesser is something that feeds ignorance, the mortal enemy of the right-sider. By creating Sarika with the purpose of being airheaded and ditzy for the sake of Takuru's own ego, she's never able to reach his level, thus never able to truly understand and grow despite her desire for knowledge. But there's a contradiction in her character, as Sarika was born into the world with another purpose, one fulfilling Takuru's need for someone above him during the chaos following the Shibuya earthquake. Takuru being pulled away from what he believed to be a safe place in front of AH Tokyo General only furthered the confusion he'd been unable to process. And this had him calling on the one thing he could trust and rely on in the pandemonium. Serika's new role is to do what Takuru had not thought his parents could ever do. Give him something to do and help him with it, rather than neglecting his basic needs. This innate purpose of Serika's has her acting out what she perceives as to be for the benefit of Takuru's future course of action. Her first order of business being to kill his parents on the spot. Were the situation to go back to normal, then whether they lived or not would be negligible, given that they were barely in Takuru's life in the first place. But if they continued to show more of this new, callous control, ignorant of his feelings, it would only be as a detriment to Takuru and what he might want to do with himself. By killing them, Serika is able to give Takuru freedom and autonomy beyond blood ties, with which he might be able to pursue his further desires of esteem and validation that Serika was initially created to fulfill. These two desires inform her split personality of cute airhead and conniving murderer, yet they merge to form her motives, leading to the return of new generation madness. Through her mind-reading abilities, and with the help of Sakuma's mind control, Serika created a game with which to challenge Takuru. Whether he lived or died was irrelevant. Whatever the outcome would be, he would have to be given something to do that would serve his interests. Serika's ultimate goal was to put him into a position similar to that of his idol, Takumi Nishijo, who used evidence to disprove claims of his indictment for the original New Generation madness. Takuru saw this triumph over suspicion by the public through evidence and logic as the sign of a true right-sider. Serika then took this admiration of his and replicated it, catching his interest and giving him purpose, before driving the case closer to him so that he might be put under suspicion and triumph over it. But this does not unfold exactly as Serika planned. After Sakuma's death, she intended to escape, leaving herself as the obvious transgressor whom Takuru could use to pin the crimes on after prior suspicion, prove his innocence, and achieve his greatest desire. But through the case, through being pressed by the mysteries surrounding him, Takuru changed. His desire changed. Nono's letter instructed Takuru to strive for recognition through the normalcy he secretly desires. The longing towards acceptance and companionship that he awkwardly tries to achieve through his knowledge and reliability, but that which is kept from him through his pride and elitism. As Takuru is faced with the opportunity to keep chasing the truth, his right-sidedness, he stops himself on Nono's wishes, both of them believing that his right-sided ambitions were the cause of his troubles. But there's nothing inherently wrong with that desire to be right. The mistake the two made was in thinking that Takuru only wanted to be right for personal validation and esteem. That's partially true. Serika's goal is to give him just that. But as Takuru mulls over what Serika told him, contradictions form in her claims regarding her purpose as a delusory existence. Faced with the discrepancy, Takuru feels the need to chase after another truth, getting a feeling he hadn't felt in a long time. The truth he seeks is not one he can tout about for pride, given its personal nature. Serika's purpose only applies to him and puts those closest to him at risk. But in seeking the truth of her nature, the truth he'd nearly avoided at Nono's insistence, he in turn seeks further understanding with which to take the most logical course of action after confronting Serika. This change happens without Serika being present, thus she is not able to realize her mistake until it was too late. Because Serika's mistake was not merely that Takuru had changed to exceed his need of her, outgrowing his once imaginary friend. In her plan, she would continue to exist as a separate entity from Takuru, blamed for those crimes. But this is her fundamental misunderstanding. She is not separate from Takuru. She is Takuru. Even though she admits to being an extension of Takuru's will, even though she was born of his mind, her purpose to act on his desire meant that her focus was purely on Takuru, the one who changed to seek the truth, not for pride, but for the greatest possible understanding. Because it was Takuru who committed the murders through Serika. He didn't merely want validation, he wanted it through proving his innocence from a crime that wouldn't have happened if not for his desire, as it was this desire that created a murderer through Serika. While one might argue that Takuru isn't responsible for the sins of his creation, their psychic bonds give Serika an inescapable tie to Takuru, She is not fully an agent of her own free will. Contrast this with the delusory Takumi and his creator, Shogun, in Chaos Head. While the delusory Takumi was created with a specific purpose in mind, he had to be convinced as an individual and given a reason by his creator to go through with the dangerous task, marking him as an individual existence despite his origin as a delusory being. But Serika is different. Through her purpose, she has something certain, concrete, and absolute that she can rely on, an objective meaning to her existence. Though born of the Shibuya earthquake, she is not a chaos child like so many others, as she is bound by truth and order. In Nono's route, Takuru similarly outgrows Serika. He similarly reaches for the desire of truth and honesty for a sake other than pride, as that honesty is the bond that keeps his adopted family together. When confronted with his new desire, Serika, now left behind by the more mature Takuru, accepts his decision happily. Her purpose has been fulfilled, and she's able to pass on in peace, because without that purpose, she is nothing. She has no reason for her actions except that they are for the sake of the deep-seated, childish, and misguided desire of her creator. To blame Serika alone would not be so different from blaming Riko's psychically created flames for their damages. Intentional or not, regretted or not, the harm caused was born of psychic powers and a formative desire. So even if manslaughter might be the more accurate term for the crime, to say Takuru is blameless would be incorrect, and it's a blame he takes fully upon himself. At the end of their battle, Serika cannot accept Takuru's choice to take the burden of the murders he desired onto himself. It's a choice he can only make because he grew beyond her, and in order to take the burden of her murders onto himself, he must figuratively kill the Serika who committed those murders, the reflection and extension of his childish, wrong-sided desires. He decides to remake her, not into a psychic being with a specific purpose, but into a normal girl. Not having a purpose terrifies Serika, but through being remade, she's given the autonomy and purity her prior, Takuru-bound incarnation never had. She's an individual, one who quickly finds purpose in her new, normal life. She may not remember the family and friends she had in the past, before the strange memory loss she fell victim to, but she decides to live well for their sake, even if she doesn't know who they are. Her life is peaceful, but the story doesn't pick up here merely because of unresolved threads, but because Serika is living a lie. Much like Takuru at the start of the game, neither understood the nature of the previous Serika, giving them a truth they must chase whether they know of it or not. Serika is still followed by repercussions, echoing memories from her past incarnation. Though she is finally separate from Takuru, much of her original personality remains, including a desire for knowledge. Initially there so that Takuru would have someone with which he could talk about anything, but now that he's gone, it remains as a curious desire to know and understand. Thus, when she's followed by memories of her past self, she's driven to pursue them. Again, seeking truth and being on the right side is not something inherently wrong. Note that her airheaded dumbness is largely absent. No longer does she have to put on that front to make Takuru look better and give him opportunities to show off. Through being made pure, through having the desire to know and knowing little herself, Serika represents the exemplary ideal of Takuru's ideology, the principle that took the events of the game for him to reach a true understanding of. As Serika is made to interact with Takuru, the self-admitted culprit in the return of New Generation Madness, she's incapable of hiding her disgust. As someone with no old friends or families in her memories, the idea of someone else losing those friends or family through murder is repulsive to her, and Takuru doesn't even deny his involvement. Though the audience is very much aware of the events leading to this point, Serika, the point of view character, is not. Thus, while their explanations are often lacking, Mio, Shinjo, and Takuru are challenged by Serika's pure right-sided desires for truth and knowledge. She doesn't offer a difficult challenge, Serika's out of her depth, but she's very much ready to question and learn. One day of briefing on Chaos Child Syndrome makes her aware of how lacking and untrustworthy the mainstream information sources are, and a common goal leads to a common conclusion. Through her knowledge, Serika helps Takuru find a cure for Chaos Child Syndrome, meeting both of their objectives. Just like that, it's over. Sarika is free to live her life, while Takuru is still fated to imprisonment for the murders. But in coming to achieve that goal, Sarika learns of the dark truths and harsh secrets of Shibuya's underbelly, while the shattered pieces of her memories stab at her brain, as if in warning that those memories could cause her pain, the memories of her previous incarnation taking the lives she now so deeply values. With harsh truths to bear, she tries to return to her normal life in willful ignorance of the abnormalities of the world, attempting to throw away the ideology that made her experience that pain and nearly lose her life. But subconsciously, she can't. With the memories eating at her, she tries to get her mind off what she thinks to be an unreachable truth she'll never have by going to see a show, coming to the theater where she was born into her current form. While watching the show, or trying, she's unable to see anything, only hear it. It's stated earlier that humans take in 80% of their information through sight, with psychics being even more sensitive. But while Sarika is no longer psychic, her creation is from those powers, and as she sees the empty theater she knows to be full of people watching a wonderful performance, she sees what she ultimately desires. The truth. She did not believe she could get the answers she wanted from those she knew, yet she still stayed in Shibuya longer than needed, a town she knew to have an uncomfortable underbelly. She ultimately did not run from the truth, and at the end of the show, she sees the same lights that shone down upon Takuru and Sarika at the climax of their battle. It's rather blatant symbolism. Through the lights, those which uncover hidden things in the darkness and represent enlightenment, Sarika sees the truth at the same time the rest of Shibuya begins to see. The Chaos Child Syndrome patients are cured through the actions of Takuru and Mio, having been forced to face the reality of their appearance and sickness, only after which they can begin to recover. To know, and then make the best choice with what you know, is the ultimate goal of the right-sider, and the best choice is one that can only be made with the most knowledge available, and the Chaos Child Syndrome patients, quite literally, only begin to recover once they begin to know. And so we return to Takuru, being transferred from the hospital to a higher security facility. Sarika's friend asks her if they know each other, to which Sarika says she doesn't. It's a lie. But her smile and tears reveal its meaning. This is not a lie that the Sarika unaware of the truth would make. That Sarika was one who may have once ran from knowing everything, who may have still hated Takuru for being a murderer. But Takuru also said that he was better off separated from the imaginary Sarika he'd constructed. The Sarika unaware of the truth did not understand what he meant at the time, but in having her memory returned, she is able to give a more meaningful response in this exchange. Her rebirth and confrontation with the truth is in service of utilizing this new Sarika as the lens with which to examine Takuru's decision to create her and brand himself the murderer. And now, knowing everything, she chooses to accept his wishes. Not because she was made to bow to his desires like before, but because she chose to as a pure-hearted right-sider. The two are separated in body and disconnected in mind, but remain together in their ideology. Takuru may be confined for his crimes, but through the reborn Sarika, his ideals still exist in the world. Not as a slave to his desires, but as an autonomous agent free of her own will to act and choose according to her best knowledge. Not to put herself above others as the Takuru of the past might have done. Takuru initially created her as an ideal to act out a specific purpose, but she's saved when she's given the freedom to act for herself. And in doing so, the pure Sarika comes to finally give him the vindication and validation he always wanted, deserved, and earned, as she gets to live freely for the sake of the one she loves, leaving them both with their greatest desires and purpose fulfilled at last.